Can you keep up with the pace of market regulatory reform? MarketsReformWiki.com, the place to keep up.
From the European perspective, what have you seen since the last CEFCON?
Since the last CEFCON, from a European perspective, all the market participants, I guess not only in Europe but also in the world outside of the US, are looking at the developments in Dodd-Frank and Dodd-Frank rulemaking and implementation to see how it affects them where they are. I think possibly one of the key differences is partly the European legislation is maybe a year, maybe a little longer behind in coming down the track, and also the nature of Dodd-Frank's reach around the world and the nature of the usage of dollars around the world means that everybody is impacted by Dodd-Frank.
How do you view the cross-border application of Dodd-Frank?
Well, I mean, a single rulebook tends to be a good thing. It all depends on the quality of that rulebook. And one of the messages we keep putting out there is that the single, if not rulebook, the single set of standards and principles should be owned by IOSCO, or IOSCO in conjunction with a committee called CPSS, the Committee on Payment Systems and Settlements. And together, that sets a global set of principles and standards for all of the regional rulebooks to adhere to work towards. And in that way, they will all be able to recognize each other.
How would such international standards be enforced?
The idea is that an international board such as IOSCO would set the standards and principles, and then national law or regional law in the case of Europe, so that you can do deals to participants in third country jurisdictions, and you know that the standards that they are being supervised to are to the standards you have in your home jurisdiction.
What is the status of European regulatory changes?
MIFID 2 and MIFIR, I mean, together with EMIR and the suite of other regulations, are really looking to put in a single rulebook across Europe, which makes it easier to do cross-border trades and to create a single market. One of the issues that was actually raised was that the two centres in Europe where a lot of financial transactions have been occurring, firstly, most obviously London, but also in Switzerland, have what the UK call this sort of gold plating, or what the Swiss call a Swiss finish, which is actually that the regulations are tighter and that the capital restrictions are more onerous. There is a desire by national regulators to gold plate, to go further than the common area, particularly in the case of countries such as the UK and even Switzerland, where many transactions are not in the home currency of that authority. Therefore, the authority seeks to charge more stringent capital requirements, more stringent conduct requirements, in order to allay any fears that it can't simply bail out by printing money. Chinese banks looking to set up in London are being requested by the regulator that they subsidiarise, they form subsidiaries. And of course, if you subsidiarise, which is a strong policy of the FSA, you have to separately capitalise that business. Whereas if you come in as a branch, you can rely on the capital of the parent firm in its home domicile. So this has become an issue over the last 2 weeks, where some Chinese banks saying they would rather branch into a different area of Europe and then use the European passports within a single market to come into London than actually come in directly. And of course, it is this sort of unleveling of a level, what should be a level playing field, that gets very difficult to explain to people from outside of Europe.
What is an organized trading facility, and why is it an important addition to MIFID?
The OTF is a welcome addition to the European regulatory landscape, and that's because of the flexibility in arranging liquidity that it affords outside of the strict definitions which were formed in MIFID 1 around an MTF, where an MTF was effectively an equity-based platform looking at equity-type product with many participants and relatively few products, and therefore an ongoing running bid and offer, if you like, or a continuum of pricing. Whereas for markets arranged by wholesale market brokers in fixed income, in derivatives, in FX, in energy, or in credit, these markets are far less frequently traded. Liquidity and prices tend to be episodic, and there is a role or a function to search for liquidity in arranging trades, which is what IDBs have always done.
What advice would you give to US regulators?
The one thing that I would say to the US regulators is give us regulatory recognition of the European rulebook, so that if you're compliant with MIFID, MIFIR, with EMIR, with short selling, then you can be accepted as being compliant to participate in the US dollar markets, in the American domestic markets, by that regulatory recognition.